Today on the show, we clone Robert Pattinson to find out how much radiation hurts. Milla Jovovich and Paul W.S. Anderson are back, and whoa, is it 2003 already? Clive Barker produces a horror movie for kids. Amanda Seyfried puts on a production of Saloma and needs the right severed head. And John Lithgow terrorizes wheelchair-bound Jeffrey Rush in Whatever Happened to Baby Jenny. Let's get started.
You too. This brick stores your memories, right? Now you'll watch as I permanently delete your being from it. No more reprints! That's what you both should be thinking when you die. Dead forever!
Mickey 17 is the new film from director Bong Joon Ho, his first since the Oscar-winning Parasite, and the movie is less like that one and more like his 2013 film Snowpiercer, only if it were more like a 70s satire like Bananas or Sleeper. Robert Pattinson is Mickey, who signs on to be an expendable, meaning he spends his time in space dying and being reprinted as a means to be a guinea pig for everything from testing gas or radiation. It combines elements of a lot of different types of films, from a wacky comedy where he gets into this job to ironically save himself from dying because he has loan sharks after him, but he's so easily distracted that he doesn't read the fine print. There will be flashbacks where it's like a serial killer film, then it can be a romance film, then there's drug-pushing plots or sex comedy jokes and a Revolution War film. In a much lesser movie, all of these elements would make a film extremely random, but here it all works to flesh out this universe and its characters, making it an extremely unpredictable film. Even the mix of drama and dark humor works. It'll be morbidly hilarious when something violent happens, but the stakes are still very real, and even parts that are particularly brutal to watch. And Robert Pattinson really balances all of the tones for the role, whether he's naive or funny, or parts where he's scary and then doing physical comedy. Really the weakest part of it, and frankly it's a big one, are the villains. They're a married couple played by Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette, where he's a former religious zealot congressman. A lot of people in this are over the top, certainly, but they all feel appropriate to the world, and I have no problem seeing them as real characters and not just the people playing them. With these two, though, it just looks like Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette being cartoonish in a bad sketch on Saturday Night Live. It starts out mildly distracting, but I'd get over it. Then as it goes on, the more they're in it more, so it goes from distracting to really taking me out of it to downright obnoxious. So much of this is in the A category for me, but it was these characters with some silly lines that brought it down to a B+. A high B+, certainly, because it's still a very original film worth checking out in theaters. But yeah, the weak parts seem like they'd be more at home in the next movie I watched. So let's get to that. Stay tuned for the latest from Paul W.S. Anderson and Milla Jovovich, and this time they've brought along Dave Bautista. That was enthralling. Well, here's a movie that gets things going from the beginning with Dave Bautista looking right at the camera. It's a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and the Queen sends out a witch to the Lost Lands to get some werewolf powers, and she brings along bounty hunter Dave Bautista to fight off an army of witch-burning Puritans, and we're good to go! Get this action going! The only note you have is to make it look as much like Fury Road as you can, only if Fury Road looked like an unsold green screen exploitation pilot for Amazon. Here's a movie where there's crowds of thousands of people looking at 5 people clearly alone in a small studio somewhere. It's a movie that has fantasy film speak, like the laws of the city and of man and nature do not apply here. Then someone will say, "Did you wet the bed again?" Characters will pop up out of the blue, and I guess they know the lead well because they then sleep together. It's got stock apocalyptic movie lines, like instead of saying, "That's a city," they say, "We call it the Rift." I love how there's all this elaborate costuming, like it's Game of Thrones, but then someone will show up just wearing aviators. Amidst the incomprehensible sequences like Werewolf Dave Bautista fighting smoke birds, there's some cool things now and then. I actually like these two together and wish they had better material. He is trying his damnedest here. Really, a lot of the actors are. They're delivering these lines like Shakespeare right before a fight on a bus riding down a zip line or a firefight inside the smokestack of a nuclear power plant. Seems safe. It's a mess of non-characters, confusing motives, and editing like it's chopped in half from a much longer movie, but it sort of works as a throwback. You know, like how the Sony Marvel movies are reminiscent of early 2000 superhero movies. This goes back to the glory days of getting shit-faced with friends, and you got two options. Go to the theater for a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, or go to the video store, where the only thing available are 12 Uwe Ball films. This is a D+. It's a hot mess, but I'll take that over the Borderlands movie. This one at least wasn't annoying. Up next, a much more realistic film, Night of the Zoopocalypse, where a meteor turns zoo animals into monsters. Stay tuned.
Monster.
So last week I saw A Sloth Story, which was actually a nice surprise, and really so is this one. From producer Clive Barker, animals fight to save their zoo from their possessed friends in what is basically a kids movie version of a 50s B movie, combined with these freakish monsters and the musical score and color scheme of something like Color Out of Space. Between the goofiness of it, the threat they're facing is very real, and the creature designs are gross, weird, and kinda cool. It's not afraid to make them look really freaky. The strengths and weaknesses of it are, funny enough, the opposite of A Sloth Story. That was a very sweet, character-driven film, which lost my interest in the third act when it became a zombie film. In this, it's the horror stuff that works the best, and the filmmaking and sci-fi set pieces are shot with this doom and gloom you'd see if it were live action with humans. But it's the characters that are the weakest part. David Harbour is good as the mountain lion, and others are serviceable at best, just unmemorable. But there are some bad characters. There's the overly cute character that's just irritating, and there's a cinephile lemur who keeps making the movie meta by saying, "This is just like Body Snatchers. Ooh, pick that up, it's gonna be a plot point. We're nearing the second act, which means this is gonna happen. Now remember, Act 3 is when this happens." It's one joke that wasn't good to begin with, and they pound it into the ground. So while the comedy may not work great, as a fast-paced kids horror movie, it's a B-. I liked it. Up next, Seven Veils, which may be a drama, but it still has severed heads. Stay tuned.
Janine, you can't just have tangerines rolling into the orchestra pit.
Who's chopping the head off?
Well, that's not clear. Maybe both of you.
Well, it doesn't take two people to chop a head off. Normally there's an axe.
From the director of The Sweet Hereafter, Seven Veils stars Amanda Seyfried, who is put in charge of a production of the Saloma opera that's being done as a tribute to her former mentor. And the more she gets into the directing, the more it's bringing up her conflicting feelings towards her former boss, and she's currently separated from her husband, and the show is bringing back traumatic memories of her father, which she incorporates into the opera by making it really a show all about her and her story. There's a lot of heaviness here, but I'm not letting that stand in the way of me really hating this film. There's not a single character or conflict I could get invested in here. Yes, there's drama with she and her husband and infidelity, but all of their scenes together are over Skype video calls with the same camera angle. Narration always pops up to tell us what we're seeing on screen and how the lead is interpreting it. Backstories will be just talked about in awkward podcast interviews or showing us the same old video footage over and over again. There's a character who is vlogging throughout it. That way we can see scenes of her talking to her phone and providing exposition for the show and other characters. While Mickey 17 avoided being oddly paced and random, this doesn't. There's a lot of scenes strung together with zero flow and actors who can't have any chemistry because it's such an empty-looking film that I had to look up and see if it was shot during COVID, which I guess it wasn't. Even when there's major conflict, like the star of the show assaulting a prop master, it makes no damn sense that this would be happening during the recording of a vlog. This was a D. Yes, I know that's a lower grade than the Paul W.S. Anderson movie, and sure, the acting is better in this one, but at least In the Lost Lands was fun bad. This movie, if I see a more pretentious movie than this in 2025, I'm gonna get in a great freaking nap. Up next, John Lithgow terrorizes people in a nursing home with a doll. Thanks, I needed this one. Stay tuned.
Who rules? Jenny Penn.
This movie is bonkers. This is a Shudder movie where Jeffrey Rush is a judge who suffers a stroke and is hauled away to a rest home for physical therapy, where the tagline could have been, "There's no dignity in aging." Between the close-ups of eating, bathing, and sleeping, this place is shot like it's a body horror film. Within minutes of getting there, a man has a cigarette and accidentally sets himself on fire, and that's before the real threat kicks in. Rush and his roommate are terrorized by a psychotic resident played by Lithgow, who walks around with a doll named Jenny Penn. He breaks into rooms to pour piss on them, he steals other people's panties, he steals their food, and locks them in their room if they fall out of bed. It's not enough that he makes people lick his doll's ass, but they put these contacts in his eyes and give him these gnarly teeth to make it look like he's halfway turning into a goblin. I kinda like this movie, despite some major flaws in it. Luckily for Lithgow's character, this seems to be a universe where security cameras don't exist, nor has anyone considered maybe recording this, or talking to anyone on the outside, or maybe moving. There is a serial killer freely roaming around this place, but the facility has the absolute dumbest staff, considering how many times he assaults people right out in the open. And the reasoning for them not collectively saying anything about this is slim to none. The more it goes on, the less sense it makes, but I was like, you know, if it sticks the landing, I could marginally recommend it, and I liked the ending okay enough. I was invested in it to see these two actors go absolutely batshit against each other, and the cinematography is very good. It all pretty much takes place in the nursing home, and they get some really beautiful shots out of it, and some surreal editing that makes the place look like it's run by David Lynch. It's a B-. It's a weirdo little film where I was always curious where it was gonna lead next. Join me next week where I'll have reviews for Novocaine and The Day the Earth Blew Up, and we'll see you next time.